Welcome to Building While Flying, a Sasha Group podcast where we interview business leaders about how they tackle challenges, stay resilient, and navigate ever-changing skies.
Hey, Sasha Nation. Thanks a lot for proposing some questions to me and James on all of our different social channels. We hope that you enjoy this episode of Building While Flying. And James, let's go ahead and get into the action.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Joe. Let's see who fired in some questions for us to answer.
@HoodBaba_ asks, how does a non-traditional storyteller successfully pivot into a career in branding?
Cool. Well, I mean, I can kick off. I think, take out some of those variables and take out the one consistent, which is the word pivot. How does anybody pivot into something else? I think it's understanding, what you've got going on in your life and figuring out how you're going to be able to commit the time, resources, energy, money into making that pivot successful. It's a little hard without knowing the specifics of this person's life to understand how to give them direct guidance. But I would say, me and James have a lot of experience figuring out pivots at the Sasha Group or Vayner because, as you can imagine, change is so constant and fluid, and we've survived a pandemic, we've survived a lot of different fluctuations in the market, and having a pivot mindset is very critical. So I think that's part of it, just having a good philosophical approach, good perspective, but then being realistic with how you can actually commit to the pivot would be.
Yeah, and a pivot doesn't always mean you got to leave something behind, right? Gary's all about the and instead of and or. A lot of what we pivoted to during the pandemic at the Sasha Group will follow us post-pandemic because it worked and we're keeping it. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Alicia Willis Tunby asks, James, was it a tough transition for you coming into the world of social media marketing, or do you feel that it was a perfect fit to an intricate puzzle?
Alicia, it was so funny because I've been through so much, in public relations, branding, general market, advertising, mobile media, and now social and digital. And what I realized is just like media, it's all additive, right? So when the radio came out, it didn't do away with the newspaper. When the television came out, it didn't do away with the radio. And when the internet came out, it didn't do away with television. It's all kind of additive. So the social digital landscape was, in fact, the one piece that I felt that I was missing in the overall marketing offering. So I was happy to have to learn it. I'm still learning each and every day, and just when I mastered one thing, another thing comes out. So I never really stopped learning, but it certainly has given me a holistic voice in an integrated marketing offering, of which all pieces are needed.
And I could probably tack onto that from a person that worked with James from day one when he came to VaynerMedia. It's not like we're building a social network. We're building a service business, which James has a tremendous amount of experience running. And we were a very young company at the time. You had leaders like myself that were VPs in the company, but we didn't have a ton of people above us that had a lot of experience running agencies like this. So him being able to bring complementary skills to the table to help train the next generation of leaders at the organization, it was a two-way street that was, I think, we won in the end by bringing in James Orsini on to kind of help coach up people like myself.
Kind words. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that point harkens true when we had our studio in Long Island City, and we were transitioning in some leadership. And Gary asked me to go run the studio for 6 months. And I said, gee, Gary, I've never run a production studio. And it was a very simple response. He said, it's a business, it's broke, you've run a business, go fix it. So it was just realizing that common business sense transcends different practices.
@Hogue asks, for a young business owner, how do you deal with older staff that push back from being managed by youth?
One thing that I've seen as constant is usually the older you get in life, and I know this for myself too, but the older you get in life, typically the more responsibilities you add, the more you can stand to lose in general. So I think what happens a lot of time when a younger person comes in to manage you, you have a little bit of job security flashes. You start thinking about whether or not things are going to change in a dramatic way. You don't want your whole entire life to get upended because you don't know what their motivations are. But I would say in general, like, you can't let that stuff get to you. And as that person's, direct manager, you've got to be able to connect with them in a way where you can show empathy and understand what they're going through from a personal perspective. So even though you're not in the same exact position, what do you have that you can show them some vulnerability and show them that they're not alone in being vulnerable. That's what I find. If you can get to that level of like raw vulnerability with an employee that's a little bit older than you, you'll typically end up winning with them in the long run.
Yeah, and I think there is no substitute for wisdom and experience. So gleaning off of that in some way, shape, or form is the best of both worlds, right? So I wrote an article once on reverse 360 mentoring, where I was trying to tell mentors, who typically are older than those that they're mentoring, that there's a lot to be learned from the mentee. Like, don't just be all closed ears and you're talking at them. Listen to what's coming back. I've learned a ton by, being the oldest guy in the building for a long period of time. What was it like working with 800 millennials, simultaneously, and what did I learn from it? And then how do I apply it, right? Much better relationship with my kids now, who really see me as super relevant because I tell them what's happening next on Snapchat before they know it, and those kind of things. But, not really forgetting who and what I am. So I think there's a problem in this particular industry with ageism.
Sure.
Okay. And this company does a great job in overcoming that. Present company included, right? Where I think I was 55 years old when Gary said, "Are you ready to start something new?" In this industry, typically at 55, when you're having a conversation with the boss, it's like, "So when are you leaving? How are you exiting?" And this was, "You ready to start something new?" And we built a whole new company off of it at the age of 55. So kudos to Gary, who doesn't see ageism in this. And there's a lot from all of us to learn from that.
Yeah, and my first boss here actually wasn't Gary. It was actually AJ, his younger brother. And AJ, even though he was probably 5 years younger than me, maybe even more, maybe 7 years younger than me, he had two like really defining characteristics that I always admired. He was super smart, right? You always kind of have to have the intellect and wit, but he was also deeply compassionate. Like, he very much cared about everybody that he was interfacing with. And when you were in a room with him, he just made you feel like there was nothing else going on in his life, and you knew that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm. So he was also my boss, by the way, when I got here. So prior to that, for many years, I was a mentor of his. Hey, how would you do this? Do you know somebody who does that? Have you ever done that before? Outside of the Vayner X walls. But when I came to VaynerMedia, he was my boss. We mutually learned off of each other. Shout out to AJ.
Tina Powell asks, what new skills should marketers learn this year?
Strategic organic content's a huge term that's been bounced around the hallways of VaynerX and Sasha Group in particular. But I think, to me, as I keep getting further and further into like the build out of what the product is, I'm learning more that it's less about like the technical skills, and it's more about the psychology or the mindset or the religion, if you want to call it that. You have to be walking into these things with the right state of mind. And the state of mind is tapping into culture, understanding what the action of volume is, and being willing to put yourself out there, being willing to turn the camera on and get as much content on camera as possible. It's really that steady action, steady flow, not getting interrupted from that flow, because if you stop, it's hard to start back up again. So similar like going to the gym or trying to lose weight, if your progress is stunted, it's hard to get back on. It's hard to get back on track. And so I think really just being super philosophical about understanding how to hack attention and how to get better at platforms in which you can gain organic and viral reach, like TikTok, right? Like, so if it's TikTok now, it may be Snapchat tomorrow, but if it's TikTok now, how do you hack it and be consistent about it?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And Tina, when we first started the Sasha Group, Gary's comment was, Sasha will stick a fork in the eye of perfection. And what he meant by that was that we weren't necessarily setting out to create award-winning artwork perfection. We were there to produce as much content as we can in a fail fast, fix fast, learn fast environment where we're constantly testing and optimizing to see what works and what doesn't work, and not be passionate about the stuff that doesn't work and lean into the stuff that does work.
So it's about creating systems and frameworks that allow you to actually achieve your goals. And it's not just, and that will apply from now until the rest of time. That's the way all social networks have operated for the past 12, 13 years. They come out with these products. They allow brands and influencers to try them for free. And then eventually they start monetizing them, and the getting is not as good. So then the people move on to other platforms. So right now it's TikTok. Can't tell you what it's going to be next year.
Yeah. One last thing, Tina, because your question was proposed as marketers, very broad term, which is fine. But it would not hurt to understand the various aspects of marketing. So when I was in public relations, we thought we did branding. When I was in branding, we thought we did advertising. When I was in advertising, we thought we did everything. So just understanding the nuances of each one of those marketing disciplines before you kind of focus in on what your pillar is also some sound advice for 2022.
At Switch Grocery asks, what's your process to prioritize? Because we really can't do everything.
We did a segment on the Eisenhower Matrix, and it talked about separating important from the urgent and categorizing different tasks by virtue of their need to either get done immediately or be done at some point in time because they were really urgent. I urge you, if you're not a Stork subscriber, actually, if you went to the 4Ds, you are a Stork subscriber. So go back and look at that episode on the Eisenhower Matrix. It's a good framework for prioritization in general. I know you lean into that often, right? Now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that aren't Stork members, we'll go ahead and release that episode for free viewing for everyone that's listening to this episode right now. So we'll put it up on our social channels.
Free is always good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Eisenhower Matrix is great. I use it not like on an everyday basis, but usually when I'm stuck. So when I'm overwhelmed and the whole world is coming at me pretty fast and I've got lots of pressure kind of coming in from all angles, but we need to kind of power through and really figure some stuff out.
Which I put on you weekly.
Yeah, weekly. Yeah. So what I typically love about the Eisenhower Matrix is it not only helps me figure out how to prioritize and start to focus in on what needs to be done kind of immediately, but it also helps me figure out what can be delegated out to people and what stuff we can just drop altogether because it's just not a priority for the company. And that's huge. Like you never know kind of how many little ankle biter issues are kind of cropping up until you take an audit of everything that's going on in your life. And, at some point, you're just going to have to take like 15 to 20 different issues that just aren't on strategy for the next couple of years. And you're going to have to ditch them. And that'll be a very freeing aspect because you could just pick up an email, forward that contact to somebody else and be like, you know what, this is not really in my wheelhouse. Let me refer you out to somebody that, or let me point you in the direction of a business that can actually help your issue. Get it off your plate. Don't let it worry you. And that's very freeing, I think, when you use something like an Eisenhower Matrix.
Neha Charnalia asks, I'd love to hear your observations on acquisition and selling SMEs. And by this, I mean, what are the things to think about when you embark on this journey?
Well, you can come at that from two ways, whether you're the seller or you're the purchaser. I like working backwards from an end goal. And that is, okay, here's my business plan to build my business to 10 million US dollars in revenue, because at that point, I'm going to be ready to sell the firm. Or you decide that another rationale may not be for money. It could be for global reach. When I was running public relations firms, I was buying up independent public relations agencies in the U.S. because they wanted a global footprint, and my company offered them that. So how would a guy from St. Paul, Minneapolis ever be able to service clients in Brussels? This is a real example because I actually moved a guy to Brussels. But anyway, those types of things, depending on what your needs are to reach. If you are the person who's selling, you want to make sure you are selling a healthy, viable, profitable business that is diversified, meaning you don't want a $5 million business that is 85% dependent on one single client, because that's high risk. You want a diversification of client portfolio. You want a diversification of offerings. And we're seeing that now, even with some of the folks that we're mentoring, right? There are certain companies in there which could be ripe for a possible sale down the road, or mature enough to make their own little acquisition. So a lot of this is sort of working backwards from an end goal.
Yeah, I'd say like understanding yourself as an entrepreneur and understanding what your motivations are, right? Like one of the things we talk to oftentimes inside of the 4Ds with different entrepreneurs, and the question Gary kind of constantly always comes back to is, how motivated are they to kind of hold on to something, both in the short term, midterm, and long term? And then what else do they want out of life, right? And how do you kind of reconcile those two things against one another? So if you're the type of person that wants to just change the world and you think that your business is a vessel to do that, then you're more of a long-term play. If you're somebody that is more motivated for financial means, and you're more, and we see this oftentimes, there's tons of different types of entrepreneurs. A lot of times entrepreneurs get the itch to create lots of different businesses, and that's okay. And sometimes one of the things that you can be motivated by is not even the fact that you're not making enough money or you want to make more money. It could just be that you need to free up time to tinker around with other businesses or start more things up. It's just an itch that a lot of guys get, or a lot of gals get. And that's okay too. So I think just kind of understanding yourself and understanding your motivations, really kind of doing that self-audit is something that all should be doing.
Jonas Raymond asks, how can I expand my personal fitness brand, My Trainer Jonas, from offering in-person local services to nationwide online services?
Well, I think the pandemic has fast-forwarded where we are with Zoom and virtual sessions 100-fold. I've spoken to at least 2 personal trainers who were able to bring more business because they weren't shackled to local clientele, right? People were used to driving or walking to their gym, and now they could provide a different service over the internet and get people from across the country or even across the globe. So the question is, what does that offering look like? When we had some new offerings at the Sasha Group during the pandemic, we had to come up with some different things. We couldn't just do what we did in person online. So they are different. The virtual 4Ds is a different version of the in-person 4Ds. Our mixtape offering, right, which was, hey, give us 10 pieces of content, give us 10 days, give us $10,000, and we'll refresh what it is that you haven't been able to do because live production was shut down at that time. You couldn't really go somewhere and film something new. So how do you make something old look new again? So it's a different twist, but it's certainly, and to our earlier questions, it's an and. Doesn't have to be an and/or. Don't have to shut down your personal training in the local gym that you're doing it in. This is a supplement to that, an additive on top of it.
Yeah, and so like if you don't want to, there's obviously like the very straightforward ways you can do this through building technology, create an app that would be very labor intensive, very time intensive, and very capital intensive. So I'll give you a secondary way you can do this and take advantage of what James was talking about, the pandemic really kind of resetting things. If you were to just go on TikTok or Instagram right now and search for a handful of different hashtags, number one, hashtag Peloton, Number 2, hashtag work from home. You're going to start smoking out all the people that have invested in working out at home during the pandemic. So those are they're not necessarily hand raisers for your services necessarily, but they've identified that they are people that are working out at home and they're interested in getting in shape, right? So you could go a hand-to-hand combat style and just pick those people off one at a time, follow them, start commenting on their content, interacting with them. Once they become familiar with you and they start observing some of your content, I think they would start to understand what it is you do. And then eventually you can follow up with them with a more firm like offer of services or something like that. And then just have your infrastructure set up, right? Are you doing it through FaceTime? Are you doing it through Zoom? Like, how are you training the people virtually? And then beyond that, if you wanted to really scale it and go macro, you can do something like what Gary does. Get your phone number out there for free. Not for free, but use mass communication vehicles to actually get your communication out to people. Yeah. Let people contact you on your cell phone, right? Through something like Community or Telegram. And then once you do that, have the infrastructure on the back end to kind of like filter out some of those people and put them into your lead pool, get them to your website, close them, have pricing kind of knocked out and all that kind of stuff. So that's it for this episode of Building While Flying. Please subscribe if you'd like to hear more content from all of our great hosts. And if you want to take in some of the action when me and James come in as guest hosts. We've had a blast answering some of your questions, and we're hoping to do more of these in the near future.
Yes. Thanks for all your questions. Appreciate it.